Wow, I love Chris Christopherson. I was very happy that he left peacefully and sad that we don't get to be blessed by his music, but we all leave a legacy behind and people that this is how we live on through the people that we've touched. And I loved his, I liked him in Blade. That was my favorite. But we've lost a lot of beautiful people. James Earl Jones with that deep tone, and it shows us the impermanence of life, and that you can't take anything with you. That we all come in and we all go out the same. So what's there to worry about? Oh, the mind finds all kinds of things. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Last week we did a little bit of an impromptu talk, but the essence of the talk last week was God is there even when my hair is on fire, right? So we have a tendency to judge ourselves when we're having these moments, but these moments are pointing us, even God is in that moment, he's pointing us to our separation, our discordant thought. And I don't know about you, how did your morning go? My morning is usually like, do you got the diaper bag? Are we there? Where's the stroller? I'm going to be late. Oh my God, where's my brush? I'm like, this morning I threw my clothes out the door. I'm like, put them in the car. And Luke goes, are you happy? I go, I am. This is how Nana releases some of her nervous energy. And I thought to myself, I need to find a new way. But in that moment, in that drive up, you start to recognize that we all have these, nervy feelings, and based on our life is how we learn to express them. And I notice that if I get that way, then Bill thinks I'm talking to him, and then he gets that way, and then Luke is like, don't yell at my papa. And I'm like, I'm not. I'm yelling at me. But that's the hair on fire that I'm talking about. And it's good for us to know that just because we get lost in our mind and the story, and that things happen as they always do, that God is right there as you. And, we have these human expressions and we've learned them, and it's very challenging. So if you go about trying not to have your hair on fire, it's quite painful. It's more easily surrendered. And so we had this brief conversation this morning about surrender, and surrender as a whole ties into the talk today. But surrender as a whole is surrendering the object or behavior or thing. It's not really surrendering ourselves. We don't need to surrender. We're already who we need to be. But we do need to, need is an interesting word. It is highly advised to surrender the situation, the person, the place, the thing. And I call it laying it at the feet because it's hard for me to bend down and I don't want to go back and pick it up. So in my mind, I lay it at the feet and I walk away. And when I notice I go back to pick it back up, the behavior, the controlling, whatever, then I recognize, oh, my hair might be on fire. And the peace that is already in us presents itself. And we see that we all have these moments, and it's an acceptance of our human experience. So I want to know, did you hear about the little boy who had a conversation with his mom about bugs? No. Well, Mom, the little boy says, are bugs good to eat? And she said, son, let's not talk about those things at the dinner table. Bugs gross me out. And the little boy said, okay. So sometime after dinner, the mom goes, okay, now, sweetie, what did you want to talk to me about in regards to bugs? And the little boy says, oh, nothing. The bug is gone. It was in your soup. Sometimes things just are not present to us, and someone is trying to tell us they are. So today we're talking about telling the truth, the path to true vulnerability. Now, this is something that we all go through, and I've started to recognize it in my life of being in our head. And our head, our mind, our brains, this is we talked a little bit about this last week. It's an amalgamation and creation of stories about everything we've been through, every person we meet, the people we like, we don't like, and whatever the situation is. And when our mind is going and we're there, everything that presents itself we believe to be true, even though you meet somebody else who has a different version of that truth, and then the conversation begins about how your truth is better than my truth. So that is not the truth that we're talking about. That is the truth of the mind that needs to be right, that has ego preservation strategies and wants to survive. The truth that I'm talking about is in the heart, the vulnerability, and what happens when we start to express from the heart, and how that opens us up to new and greater senses of freedom. So when we operate from the head, that truth is shaped often by fear, ego, and self-protection or self-preservation strategies. But the heart, it invites us into deeper authenticity. Think of a time where you hesitated maybe to speak up for something that you believed in. Because, sometimes it's very hard to speak up in groups. It's very hard for us to voice our truth because in the mind, we are conditioned to need collective whole, to be together. And being ostracized from a group can be very painful. So the mind, or the brain, very rooted in its beliefs, begins to think if I say anything about how I feel or what I need, that we will be kicked out of the group. And so we sometimes sit in painful silence. And I don't know about you, but I've had these experiences. And so telling that truth, that authentic, heartfelt truth, can be really uncomfortable, and it can bring us, it can create senses of resentment and disconnection and chaos. But when we step down, or we fall into the heart, I like to say, and we start to express from that place, we start to have a sense of genuine connection. And oddly enough, there's been a lot of conversation with me lately about a sense of knowing that our community is entering into this heart space connection and this feeling of belonging, and there's more for that to be revealed. But that is the essence of this ministry, is to bring that heart-centeredness in, so that there is a connection, and in that connection we can say what we feel. And what sometimes gets in the way of that, for me sometimes, is when we are trying to be authentic. Bad habit, sorry. When we are trying to be authentic, the mind kicks in with, if you do that, they're gonna fill in the blank. If you tell them that, they're gonna fill in the blank. If you say that, or if I do that, or if I go that way, fill in the blank. And it creates stories, and if we do not drop into the heart and say what we need to say, a sense of separation happens. So all the games that are played in our humanity are played from the mind, from the ego. It is the war to end all wars, and but the heart is the space to end all wars. So when we drop into our heart, we begin to express authentically. We're able to tell the truth. What sometimes the mind gets in the way is the behaviors of others that triggers us. So if a behavior of another is triggering us, one, it has to be familiar to us, consciously or unconscious, right? So if another is behaving and that triggers us, and then a mind wants to defend, get angry, get upset, it wants to blame, shame, guilt, not go to direct gossip, then it is a sign that we need to drop into the heart and maybe share with that person, when you do this, I feel this. When you say that, this is what's going on with me. But the story that the mind creates, if you haven't noticed, is it is an extremely vulnerable place to be, to share with someone your feelings and sense of truth and your identity. And what happens is the story of our mind ends up being the lie, and the truth ends up being the connection, and then relationships flourish. Because one of the things that I've learned about children is the thing that they strive for is connection, consistency, and a sense of belonging. They want to know what you're thinking, what you're feeling, because when they have that information, or they know your set point for, I can't go past that, it breeds a collective of knowing each other's boundaries. It creates a collective of knowing I can be vulnerable with you and share, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the behavior of the other person will stop. It doesn't even mean that they will take what you're saying literally, or that they will even respect it. They might continue on with their behavior. That's not your problem, right? Because once you say it, express it, reveal it, in a true sense of authenticity and vulnerability, you and your heart grows, and you become magnetized with this vulnerability. Your mind starts to quiet down a little bit, and we release them from our story to have their own. So often we don't, oh, what's the point in telling them? They're just going to do it anyway. Or what's the point of saying what I think? This is my favorite for me. Like, why tell them? They already did it. I mean, and, me going in to have a conversation with them isn't going to undo what they said or did. And no, but what it does do is it tells them, hey, please don't do that anymore. And if they do continue, then at least you've entered into a conversation to set the pace for the next conversation. It reveals your heart and a sense of openness, and it relieves the sense of frustration, resentment, anger, fear, and you really do have a release. When is a time in your life that you faced a situation head on and the mind told you, don't do that, danger, Will Robinson, don't go that way, and you went ahead and overrode your mind, stepped into the heart, and shared? It's a very scary and vulnerable place to be. Ernest Holmes says, turn entirely away from the condition, because the answer is not in the condition. The condition is a result of the way you've been thinking. So if we follow the thinking, we are more likely to end up using our head, our minds, our brains, and logic to try to resolve a problem, which is usually wanting to win people to our side. It's usually wanting to have it our way, and we can't open and express in a deep, profound listening to the heart, because often when people come to us with this situation, it's not even that they want their way, they just want to be heard. Because somewhere in their life, they were shut down. Somewhere in their life, someone didn't listen to them. I was talking to Shelley, I was telling you about the painting, and we were talking about singing, and she goes, when I was young, I was told I couldn't sing. And so now her little card says she is the closet chanter. And I loved it. It was this little card with the night sky and the door opening up and the light and the notes coming out. And I thought, what a beautiful representation of stepping out into your truth, into your own authentic truth. Because also what happens, do you not only meet people and situations, but you also become your authentic self. You don't hide anymore. You don't feel that sense of anger and frustration and resentment, and nobody listens to me, and God, why even, what's the point? And we start to release this, and we can see that it's old memories, old conditioning, because as children, we collect these whether we want them to or not. We could have the most wonderful parents in the world, but you went to school, you have friends, there's cliques, there's groups, and in that weaving tapestry of our lives, the things that we need to encounter to point us on our path home, we will encounter. And we embody them and make them about us, and it pushes us to what's the point, or I'm not enough, or, we have these conscious and unconscious thoughts. It reminds me that staying in the head often creates a situation where we are hiding from the truth, and because there's no one else, there's only one, we're hiding from our own truth. When we step into the heart, we start to embody a deeper sense of trust and faith and love in the thing that we cannot see. Telling the truth through vulnerability is essential to expose the lie, for us to build that faith and relationship with our inner divine, with ourself. And it's often happening through the through the buttons of these interactions of life with our loved ones, and in community, at home, our friendships. And I don't know about you, but my first response is often to go out. And I've committed myself to, when I catch myself going out, is to not to judge, blame, or shame me, but to go back in and do the work and say, okay, you're agitated here. What's the truth that needs to be told? And it doesn't even need to be told to the other person. I'm expressing it like you may want to have that conversation, but it does not have to happen, because the internal forgiveness, the internal dialogue is the one that often just makes that problem disappear most often anyway, or that person will leave your energy field. I was thinking about someone today that I haven't seen for a very long time, and I thought, oh, yeah, it was done. Whatever needed to happen, it happened. And so often when these people pop into my mind, I just release them with love and say, thank you for the time that you crossed my path. And sometimes I write little notes, because if I felt like I didn't tell them the truth or express myself, it didn't need to happen with them necessarily, but in me. And it heals something, and it reveals more qualities of God. And we become the qualities of God. And we are peace. We are light. We are joy. We're not expressing them, because that, to me, says you have to do something to express joy and peace and love. But you don't have to do anything, because you are already that. The work that needs to be done is to reveal the lie, the mind, the stories of our life. And when those fall away, like petals off of a flower, what's revealed is the true self, who you truly are, and its nature is authenticity. So it's not even a fight to be authentic. It's a revealing of spirit through contemplation, meditation, and the inner work. Sitting with people now, that this sense of this has been revealed to me, how can you tell you're in the head? Well, you can tell because here it is blame, shame, gossip. It's also defense. It's also like when someone says something to you and you want to defend it, you're in your head. But if we drop to the heart, we might say, oh gosh, that sounds like a lot. I'm not really ready to have that conversation yet. Or it might sound like, well, it seems like you have a lot to say. Of course I'll sit and deeply listen to you. Because you don't, this is their expression to you, and unless you accept it to be a part of yourself, it's just an expression of self, right, of the mind. My mentor, Reverend Sherrill, said, if you were, 4 foot nothing and 98 pounds, and someone said, you're as big as a house, you would laugh, because you're not going to own that. That's not your physicality. But if they touch something that you believe about yourself, that's the work we're doing. So they're a medicine for you in authenticity, even in their work. It's not your job to get other people to do work. We can't help anybody. But what we can do is our work. And then shift and change and become magnetized. And then they want to know, I want some of that. They want to know, why are you so peaceful? How are you so calm? Did you ever have any problems? And you start to be drawn to these people where you can share your truth, but you don't take responsibility for their behaviors. Vulnerability is not about winning or losing. It's having the courage to show up and be seen when we have no control over the outcome. Brene Brown says this, and I love her work on vulnerability. It took me a long time, until recently, actually, to understand all of the things that she was talking about in terms of being vulnerable, because it's a word that I used a lot but didn't totally understand until recently. Vulnerability requires us to be fully present, meaning out of the mind and into the heart. And even when we can't control how others respond to our truth, like I said, their behaviors, we can still drop into our heart and meet them. Because the one thing that I know about people is when they're angry or they're feeling very strong, energetic feelings, if they're projecting them onto other people, the underlying core of that is anger and fear. And so once we know that, it might look like they're doing that, and then we catch the ball, and then we throw it back, and we play this game of ping pong, with this, and nobody ever gets to the heart-centered truth, I see you, which can be really difficult depending on the situation. There are a lot of horrific things that happen in our world that happen to us or that we're a part of, and what we start to do is just lay those stories down and recognize they are not us. They are a story about us. That our truth, our wholeness, our heart, our spirit, our essential nature is the one that is moving and having its being in this human body, and that they are actually one, so when we step into the heart, we start to recognize that when we've caught the ball and when we can go home and lay it down gently and be nice to ourselves, it doesn't mean that we have to go do anything or say anything to anyone else, because all forgiveness happens within your own heart. And it is felt by others when this transmutation starts to happen. When we deny our stories, they define us. When we have the courage of vulnerability, we rewrite the narrative that holds us back. There's a truth to be shared in vulnerability, and what might happen if you allow yourself to do it is you actually feel yourself growing in faith and connection to your divine self, your true nature. The angst and feelings that often we find ourselves in a place like this, or we go to meet practitioners, or we have spiritual teachers or inquiries, we often kind of suffer with these habits in silence, and in hopes that nobody will see them. But honestly, they're the loudest things about us, is the things that we don't want anyone to see. So when we find someone that we trust and we can share them with, and they can show us that it's just residual energy, your mother's voice in your head, or your father's, or a teacher, and a lie that you've been telling yourself about this body-mind, and it falls away, and what's left and revealed is love, then you are loving. So telling the truth is a challenge. It can be painful. But when you have the courage to face it, it's the privilege of a lifetime. Joseph Campbell says, the privilege of a lifetime is getting to become who you are. We honor our truth and share it authentically, and we step into the fullness of spirit. Truth isn't something that we create. It's something that we discover. This is what Ernest Holmes has said to us. The power of truth is a freedom that comes when we live in alignment with it. We must trust that telling of the truth, that declaring that power is a sense of freedom. And I want you to start recognizing through your week when you're in your head, and how difficult it sometimes, and the narration that happens between head and heart, and that it takes some time, and to be gentle and easy with yourself. And if you need some help, find a heart partner that says, hey, I'm stuck in my head and I really want to feel my heart. And find someone that deeply listens, and it doesn't need to say anything, that can just quietly hang up the phone, and you've expressed, and watch the revealing of spirit happen. See the unfolding of how all of the things you desire in your life grow, whether it be a job or money or a relationship. When we are transformed, our lives become the effect of the teaching. It is one thing to learn the teaching, put more knowledge in your mind, just keep going to classes and just piling it up there and getting confused. The true sense happens when the teaching is truly understood at a conscious level, and your life becomes the representation of the teaching. It is the effect. So my teacher said this, and I'll close. I said, hey, we don't spend a lot of time talking about spiritual stuff on these calls. And he said, no, because when you talk, I see the effect of the teaching, and I know which way to point you. And through that pointing, love is revealed. And I know that for you, and I know that for me. And I just say this talk just stands as that prayer that talks. This talk, as it's given to me from Spirit, is the truth of your being. Let's all step into that field where we can tell each other the truth, look each other in the eye, and say, I see you, I love you, you are heard. Namaste. And so it is.